In 1986, the city of Philadelphia had a problem. The city disposal sanitation workers were on strike. They decided that they didn't want to work and the wage wasn't fair, and so they wouldn't go pick the garbage up from the different homes around the city. And so all of the trash started to pile higher and higher. And the city didn't know what to do. I mean, you can imagine if you go on vacation and you forget to take your trash out for a week and then you come back. Imagine that for a few months. And so as the trash started to pile up, the city came up with a solution. They contracted with the Amalgamated Shipping Corporation, and the agreement was to have all the garbage of the city loaded onto a ship called the Cayenne Sea. And they were going to take this ship and haul off all of the trash to another location. Now, just for your information, the trash of the people in Philadelphia is much like the trash of the people in Cleveland, Tennessee. There were coffee grounds and chicken bones and hot dogs and aluminum cans and tin foil and various other unmentionables in this trash. And so what they did was they loaded 15,000 tons of garbage, waste, litter, debris, and junk on a 466-foot barge, and they floated it off into the black hole known as New Jersey. There was one problem, though. When the ship arrived at the port, word had already reached the people of New Jersey of what was happening, and they decided that they didn't want it. Now, some of you who are a little more seasoned saints in this room are nodding your head because you remember some of the news about this situation. New Jersey said, "We don't want it. We don't want your trash," and so they wouldn't allow the ship to unload. Well, they went back and forth and they talked about different things and they were trying to figure out what to do, and finally they came to a stalemate. And so you had this 466-foot barge with 15,000 tons of trash just parked in the ocean. So they left. They decided they'd float down to the Bahamas. Maybe the Bahamas would allow us to unload all of this trash. Well, even though they didn't have the internet, word still traveled at lightning speed. And the news reached the Bahamas before the boat did. And when the boat came there, they said, "No, you can't unload here either." So they left the Bahamas and continued through the Caribbean. They went to Haiti. They went to Dominican Republic. They were rejected. They went to Bermuda. They were rejected. And so they continued to sail. They went all around the world. They went to the Netherlands. They went to Sri Lanka. They went to Singapore. They went to Senegal. And each time the boat was refused to port. And so for 14 years, this 466-foot barge floated around the world with nowhere to land, just carrying trash. And there's a lot more detail to this story if you ever read it, or some of you that remember. Some of the trash may or may not have disappeared into the ocean, but this boat was filled with trash and had nowhere to land. You know, there's a lot of people in Cleveland that can associate with that. There's a lot of people floating around carrying a lot of trash. Spiritual trash that's accumulated in their life. Junk and debris, things that they're carrying for years and years, and they feel like they have nowhere to land, and so they just wonder. In fact, there's probably people in this church struggle with that. You carry some things. You just assume this is part of your life. This is just how it's going to be. This is just the way the relationship is. This is just the way the employment is. I just have to learn to deal with it. Everybody has problems. So you float along, carrying these different things. It is to those that wander in the ocean of life, that struggle carrying the debris and the junk, that Jesus offers the most beautiful of invitations. In the book of Matthew, chapter 11, verse 28, Jesus is speaking and he says these words. He says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Now, stop right there for a moment. Jesus makes this all-inclusive promise to the hurting. But the promise isn't just for them. He speaks to those who are weary and heavy laden, and he says, come to me. He says, come to me. There's this action that's involved. And traditionally we think about this as a salvation scripture, and it really is. It's a beautiful invitation that if you're struggling with sin, if you're carrying things, if you're walking through life, that you can come to Jesus and bring him your sin, and he will forgive your sin. But it's more than that. It's not just for those who are struggling and lost in sin. It is for those saints that go out in life and they have more and more stuff piled on top of them. It's not just those that are hurting. It's for those that are weary and heavy laden. But Jesus says, come. There's this action, this responsibility, this initiative that has to be taken on our side to come to Jesus. What does that mean to come to Jesus? What does that mean to approach Jesus? It's much more than just walking down an aisle and saying a prayer one time in a service somewhere. Amen. Coming to Jesus is a daily, repetitive thing. I don't know about you, but I have to continually come to Jesus. Amen. Jesus says, come unto me. There's this amazing thing that happens at my house. I don't know if this happens at your house. Maybe we're just weird. I think it might happen at some of your homes, but every Thursday night, we'll take our trash out to the corner. All the trash in our house, okay? Every Thursday night, we take it out. We got these big bins, and we set it out by the mailbox. And then Friday, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes like 10 o'clock, these two guys in a truck, they come by, and they take all our trash away. Does that happen at your house? It's amazing. They don't ask any questions. You don't have to fill out any paperwork. But you know what they don't do? Been living here 10 years. Never once have I had them knock on my door and say, hey, you forgot to empty the little trash cans in the bathroom. Never once do they come knock on the door and say, hey, Jason, your kids, they left some pizza boxes in the garage. No. It's my responsibility. And what I take to them, they take away. And in a similar way, it is our responsibility to come to Jesus. You can come to Jesus. You can walk down an aisle and say a prayer and come to Jesus, but you can also walk down an aisle and never, ever approach Jesus. So many times we forget that when the Holy Spirit speaks to our hearts and our lives, he is drawing us to Jesus. That may be in your car on the road. That may be at work. That may be in the privacy of your room. There are so many different ways to come to Jesus, but it's important that you must take initiative and come to Jesus. He says, come unto me, all you that are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Do you know what it's like to be weary and heavy laden? We all know what it's like to be weary. I mean, this is Memorial Day weekend, and many of you have planned on what you're going to do months in advance. Some of you right now have your vehicle loaded, and as soon as I can say the final amen, you're going to grab a sandwich that Mama made, and you're going to get on the road and go somewhere and be on a boat, hopefully not the Cayenne Sea, but you'll be on a boat somewhere floating. We all know what it's like to be weary and want rest, but Jesus gives this invitation to those that are weary and heavy laden. And heavy laden. You know what it's like to be weary and heavy laden when you squeeze 10 hours of work in a 9-hour day. You pull in the driveway and the phone rings. It's your kid's teacher, and they want to have a conference because Johnny Jr. is acting like his dad again, and they're about to kick him out of school. Now you're not just weary, but you are weary and heavy laden. You know, when you're required to give care to your parents because the roles are reversed and you leave your first job and go home to your second job because you got to make it work. You're not just tired, but you're tired and heavy laden. When you get home and there's more month than there is money, and you don't know where the answer is going to come from, and you got to get shoes, but you got to pay the light bill, you are weary and heavy laden. When you lay awake at night because you can't sleep, because your adult age kids aren't really acting like adults, and they surely aren't following Jesus, that's being weary and heavy laden. And to all of those, to all of us, Jesus says, come. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. There's a promise, and fundamentally we understand this is a call to salvation, but this is also a call to the disciple. It's a call to those that just walked in the church door, and it's a call to those that have been sitting in church for 50 years. It's a call that says, whatever you're carrying, whatever trash is on the boat, don't forget that Jesus will give you rest when you come unto him. Interesting thing here. Jesus is giving rest. He's not selling it. You know, a couple of months ago, my family and I, we were walking in the mall because that's how you torture a dad. And as we're walking, my youngest says, I need to go to the bathroom, which I immediately volunteer to walk her to the bathroom because it's 2017, number one, and because I don't want to shop anymore. Like, I can go in and get my stuff and leave. I already know what I want to get, but okay, let's do something different. So I walk her to the bathroom, and it's in the, usually the bathrooms are on the end in the department stores. And so we go to the end in one of these stores, and we go upstairs, and she walks into the women's bathroom, and I'm standing kind of outside just waiting, and it's in the home section where all the little short beds are, I've always been tempted to take a nap on one of those short beds while they're shopping, but I won't do it. And they have these trays of pillows. All these pillows are just laid out, and they're different thickness and different firmness, and they've got them displayed so that you can touch the pillows and find which one you think would be best for you. And I'm touching this one pillow, and I look at the bottom of it, and the price tag says $145. So I immediately try to find the security cameras because I'm like, we got to get out of here. And I start looking around. There's a lot of people that charge a lot of money for rest. Rest is a high-valued commodity. You just go a couple of days without it and see what you would pay. I mean, when you start adding it up, all the money that's spent in mattresses and pillows, and some of you laugh right now because that's an element of truth in your life. You got to have your mattress where you push it and it winds up and gets you just right, and then you got to push the button where he gets right so he'll quit snoring. There's a lot invested in rest, and you got to have the right thread count on your Egyptian cotton sheets. I talked to a man in this church that told me he knows the difference between 72 degrees and 71 degrees when he's asleep. And if his wife puts a thermostat on 72, he can tell because it's too hot. That's Ben Perez. And you laugh because you are the exact same way. And sometimes even then, rest is fleeting. And if you're, some people, if you walk in the pharmacy aisle, you'll just see just this whole aisle of sleep aids and medication that you can help fall asleep. And if you're a good old Church of God person, you might take about that much NyQuil to help you sometimes. Rest is a high-valued commodity in our life. And on a serious note, over 40 million people in America take some type of prescription to help them deal with anxiety because rest is fleeting from them. And when they lay down their head, it's a serious issue. There's things that when you lay down, your brain just doesn't stop. It keeps going, and it keeps going, and it keeps working. Jesus says, those of you that are struggling, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to make any money off you. I'm giving you rest. Come to me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. The next verse says this. It says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest unto your souls. See, first we come to Jesus, and then we take from Jesus. And what do we take? We take his yoke. This is unfamiliar language for us. This was very familiar for Jesus, but this is unfamiliar for our day because we don't really use yokes anymore. I called the best farmer I know in town, and he couldn't find me a yoke. We use tractors now. But a yoke back in Jesus' day was this wooden bar that had these two loops on the bottom, and you would put oxen in them, and here's what it did. It prevented the oxen from going in different directions. They were at the mercy and direction of the farmer who's driving the plow. And so what essentially you have is this farmer that sees the direction they want to go, but the power is happening within the oxen. And to keep them from going in different directions and to keep them evenly lined, they are yoked together so that the mission of tilling the land can be accomplished. Now, understand this. Jesus isn't dehumanizing his followers here. He isn't saying, okay, you're less than human, you're nothing more than an animal, and you're going to do exactly what I tell you. On the contrary, Jesus is helping us understand the fullness of humanity. He's helping us understand that what he's created us to do is to live in partnership with him. Because yes, Jesus owns the yoke, but by becoming man, he stepped into that yoke with us. And he said, hey, I'm not just going to tell you what to do, I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm not just going to tell you to pull this plow. I'm going to get in there with you. And being yoked with Jesus means, hey, I might get distracted and go this way, but I'm not going that way because now I'm yoked up with Jesus. I'm connected to him. Don't ever misunderstand this. You will be yoked to something in your life. You will be connected to something in your life. There will be a mission. There will be a purpose. There will be a person, there will be something worthy or unworthy that you will be yoked to in your life. And Jesus says, come to me and take my yoke upon you. It's an invitation to walk with him step after step. It's not an invitation of a God that says, hey, listen, I'm driving the plow and you do what I tell you to do. It's an invitation where Jesus says, I'm in the yoke with you and I'm walking with you every step of the way. And just in case you start to get distracted or you start to get off course, hey, I'm linked up with you. Take my yoke upon you. When Jesus said this, he was speaking the language of the people. The rabbis around him that heard this, they knew exactly what he's saying. The public worship in the ancient synagogue concluded with a benediction that was 3 passages of Deuteronomy. And they did this for a specific reason. They ordered them and structured them in a certain way so that the people could take the yoke of the kingdom and the yoke of the law upon them. And Jesus was telling them, take my yoke upon you. Essentially what he's saying to them is this: there's a system, there's a way of doing things that's difficult and painful and arduous and impossible, but you can exchange that system for what I am bringing you. And that speaks to us today because so many times we want to go our own way. We want to do our own thing. We want to say, hey, I can figure all this out. And Jesus is saying, you're going to create more problems for yourself than you know how to deal with. Take my yoke instead. Yoke up with me, link up with me, be connected with me. Let me walk step in step with you so that you can see my plans and my purpose for your life. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. By taking the yoke of Jesus, it's an invitation to learn of Jesus. And while it is a call of salvation, it's also a call of discipleship. See, we have a lot of people that come to Jesus, but not a lot of people that learn of Jesus. Not enough amens on that one. We have a lot of people that come to Jesus, but not a lot of people that learn of Jesus. What happens is we come to Jesus and we get this rest and we get this temporary thing going on, and then we leave here and we go back to our old systems and we go back to our own yokes and we go back to our old way of doing things, and our boat just loads up with more trash again and again. And Jesus is saying, not just come to me, but come to me and learn of me. Walk step in step with me. Allow me to go with you on the journey. Don't just come here one time and get the genie in the bottle where he forgives your sins and then you're clean and go ahead, you've got fire insurance, go do what you want to do. No, Jesus is saying, learn of me. Walk with me. It is a call to discipleship to say, I am with you. And when you take that yoke of Jesus, when you learn of him, it is in meekness and humility. Boy, isn't that contrary to what our culture teaches? Boy, our society, we don't have a lot of room for me. When you see someone that is humble in heart, it's refreshing. Our society says, be the best, have the most, go to the top, You're number one. Give everybody your resume and show them why you're the greatest and show them why you dominate. And Jesus says, no, that's not the way of the kingdom. Because that way is going to be very difficult. But this yoke is easy. This burden is light. It is filled with meekness and humility. That's learning of Jesus. And when you do that, he promises rest. Now hear this. The promise of Jesus is not that your problems disappear. We say that over and over again in church and in churches around America. I've heard pastors say it so many times. The promise of Jesus is not that your problems will all disappear. Your problems will not all disappear when you take the yoke of Jesus upon you. But when you yoke up with Jesus, you are now walking step in step with him through life. And I don't know about you. I'd rather walk through my problems with Jesus than without him. I've tried it both ways. And let me just tell you, it doesn't work the other way. It's not very comfortable. It's painful. You live a life filled with regret. But when you get linked up with Jesus and learn from him in meekness and humility, and you say, just like Jesus prayed, not my will, but your will be done. Whenever you start to walk that direction, then the yoke becomes easy and the burden becomes light. The promise isn't that everything disappears. The promise isn't that you won't have any problems. The promise isn't that you won't have any health issues. The promise is this: when you come to him, you'll find rest. When the world's falling apart, you have a place to land. You can dock your boat with Jesus. He says, come to me, all you that labor. You don't have to float around anymore. You don't have to carry your own trash, but you can come here and find rest for your soul. And so, 4 name changes later, 3 manifest changes, and 14 years at sea, the ship, the Cayenne Sea, finally was deemed non-toxic by the EPA and was received by a landfill in Pennsylvania, which ironically was about 160 miles from where it started. Now, here's how we're going to close. There's irony in that, but it also speaks to us today. Some of you came to Jesus years and years ago, but you're still floating around carrying trash, and you're carrying stuff, and you're dealing with it. And the answer for you is not far from where you started. You've come to him, and you've been to the altar, and you've been every preacher's dream. You got saved 100 times. You ride this altar to heaven, and if you have to do that, that's great. But Jesus is giving an invitation to the disciple as well and saying, you can come and learn of me in meekness and in humility, and I will give you rest. You come to me and I will give you rest, and you learn of me and I will give you rest. That's how you see these people. That's how you see these people that have difficulty in their life and can still lay down and sleep. It's not because they're oblivious. It's because they're yoked up with Jesus. And they understand the fact that it doesn't matter what the doctor says. It doesn't matter what the bank account says. It doesn't matter what my children do. It doesn't matter what my spouse is doing. I can find rest because I am yoked up with Jesus. He says, come and learn of me. And so many times we come and say the prayer and then we walk away. We load that boat up with trash again, and Jesus is inviting you this morning. If you don't know him, yes, it's a call to salvation. But if you do know him and you're weary and you're tired and you're heavy laden, it's also a call to you as well to say, I will refresh you. I'll get in the trenches with you. I'll link up with you and walk with you step by step through this whole thing. You don't have to be alone in this. You can draw strength from me. Take my yoke upon you. Learn of me. One more thing. Before they deemed it non-toxic, the EPA sent a scientist out to this boat. It was parked about 2 miles off the coast of Florida. That makes you feel good if you eat shrimp, huh? And so it was parked off this thing, and this scientist went out there, and he went to look inside because he wanted to see, what does 14-year-old trash look like? You know when he went in there, what he reported? There was grass, flowers, and some trees had started to grow in this thing. In the middle of the trash, in the middle of the junk. And when I read that, you know when it spoke to me? It said this to me. Out of the difficulty of your life, God can redeem the trash and the tough things that you're going through and make something beautiful out of it. I don't know why your relationship's so difficult. I don't know why your kids are living like they're living. I don't know why God's put this on you to take care of your family and your parents too. I don't know why it's happening that way. But I do know this. If you'll link up with Jesus, something beautiful is going to happen.